Mr. Mulvaney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Briefly, I think one thing that we heard earlier bears repeating. I was as surprised as Colonel West was when we met with the President this morning and were told by him from his own mouth that he had very little direct control over the regulatory environment. And Ms. Ozer, you mentioned that one of the hurdles that you had been facing in your business dealt with the FDIC. So I ask you, ma'am, who oversees the FDIC? Is it Treasury?
I think it's an independent agency.
I believe
it's under
Treasury, which would be Mr. Geithner, who is a presidential appointment. We actually have a meeting with Mr. Geithner in a few minutes, so I'm going to ask him directly about his role over the regulatory environment. I was very surprised to hear that. But let's come to the issue at hand, and I have a question for Mr. Kotler. You heard Mr. Hall talk about the role that franchising plays. I've been a franchisor, I've been a franchisee, and he's absolutely right. There's a tremendous pent-up demand in our industry. Traditionally, our industry has been sort of a stabilizer. It's been counter-cyclical. When business got bad and people got laid off, they would turn to franchising as a way to start their own businesses. We saw that in our own business. The demand for our restaurants went up dramatically, but the ability of people actually to open them fell to zero because no one could get financing. Mr. Kotler, let me ask you this. You've talked about what is preventing you folks from lending, and I heard all the things that I would ordinarily expect, which is your cash flow and your collateral. It makes perfect sense to me. But my question is this. Is there anything that we can do or perhaps undo as a government to help you lend money? And I'll give you the example that I take from another industry, which is the real estate industry, which is having a great deal of difficulty refinancing right now. And it's in large part because of regulation, that there's a rule in place now that says if you refinance a real estate loan, even though it's perfectly healthy and performing, if you refinance it, it automatically goes into a troubled asset category. And to me, that shows some opportunity for us to fix things. So I put it to you, Mr. Kotler, what can we do or undo to help you lend money to folks like Mr. Hall?
You know, I think one of the things is be supportive of the SBA programs. A lot of our banks use them. And the increases that were done in the amount to lend and some of the other things that were done there have been pretty important, and banks have used that pretty aggressively through this economic environment to make loans. I think that's the primary thing, other than just the more global economic things that I just think we have to continue to work on, and that'll take care of a lot of it in the process.
Mr. Hawley makes an excellent point, and you talked about the fact in your testimony that if there were no SBA lending out there, we'd have almost none in our industry. Have you ever done an SBA loan?
No, sir, I have not.
Has anybody, well, I know Ms. Ozer has. Ms. Ozer, could you tell us the difference in terms of the paperwork involved behind getting an SBA loan and a traditional loan? Maybe Mr. Kotler could help on that as well, because it's not apples to apples. It's much more difficult to get an SBA loan than it is an ordinary free market loan.
The amount of credit information that's required from the borrower, the basic credit information is the same. In order to do your due diligence in the underwriting process that the Congresswoman had asked about before, we need the same amount of financial information. However, when you are applying for an SBA loan, there are rules and regulations, standard operating procedures that have to be followed. So if you decide to borrow money from a bank who has expertise in that area, there should not be a huge amount of difference for the individual borrower. But you do need to have a lender that has experience in that, because there's credit underwriting on the bank level, and then there's credit underwriting that has to be done on behalf of the Small Business Administration. So there is basically 2 times the amount of work. You can use the same credit underwriting, but you do have forms and applications that need to be done, eligibility checklists that need to be done, tracking of use of proceeds, and there is more of an administrative burden on the bank to do an SBA loan. But the borrower themselves shouldn't really be experiencing more problems.
I had the great pleasure of having an SBA loan one time. It was a great experience, don't get me wrong, but as between going the SBA route and the conventional route was always preferable. Yes, sir, Mr. Hall.
Well, I would add that while I haven't had an SBA loan, it looks like I'm going to be going after one. And I'll just give you the real world perspective on that. In the past, if I put a new unit in or put a restaurant in, I'm typically putting a lot of capital in there already in addition to the loan. And in times past, I may not have had to guarantee the loan personally. In fact, I wouldn't do it unless I absolutely had to. In today's environment, every bank is making me guarantee that loan personally. So now, faced with the fact that I probably can't get the loan at the commercial bank, I'm now saying, okay, well, I got to go through SBA if I want to expand my Dairy Queens, which I'm currently looking at right now. I am probably going to expand my Dairy Queens to refurbish them through an SBA program, because that's really the only route I can take. Now, am I excited about, one, the paperwork, and two, personally guaranteeing it with everything I have when I'm putting a lot of capital into it? No, I'm not, but I don't really have a choice if I want to renovate my units. So that's the response about the SBA.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.